talk about writing, I also want to, it won't be the first question, but I want to put in to think about writing and artificial intelligence to think about, because I want to address that as writers. Also, in terms of writing, I want us to begin to think about if we were to try to do today what scholars did, and this is the first piece I want. This is a little bit different than, we're going to go into your stories in a moment, but if we were to try to do today what authors in the past did in terms of having their collected works, would we be able to do it? And if not, what do we need to change to be able to do that? Because I see that I can go and get the complete collected works of Abraham Lincoln. I can get the complete works of Marcus Garvey. I can get the complete works of lots of thinkers. But I'm wondering today if we're writing enough to be able to do that. And if not, is it okay, or should we change something? I'm gonna start with you, John.
So the question, to make sure that I understood you properly, you're saying, is it possible to have the same orientation towards writing today as, 50, like a century ago, or?
Not even a century ago, but could you compile today? Could you and or someone else look back over the legacy of the things that you've done, and is it possible to write up a compendium of all the things that you've been thinking and talking about? How did you get to writing your first book, right? So in the past, we would be able to look at and see how somebody got to that point. Can we do that today? And if not, should we change something, or is it okay that it is the way it's going?
I mean, you said artificial intelligence, so I guess through social media.
Well, I want to come to artificial intelligence much later.
Much later.
Yeah, because but if that's the direction you want to go, it's cool.
I mean, that was the only, outside of that, in regards to documenting the process, I do that on certain degrees on my Instagram page, which has worked very well for me, but outside of the traditional sense, no, it's too many distractions. I can't simply put, it's just too much, there's not enough. As a writer, you need stillness and silence, spaces where you can just be by yourself. There's very few spaces like that now. I mean, that's me personally. I don't see it. It's just bombarded with too many things, too much with life happening so quickly, so.
You pull up this mic here, and then Martin can have it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm.
Pull up a little closer. There you
Okay. Is this better?
go. Yes.
Okay. I think I was kind of meant to be a writer almost. When I was a little kid, I loved to read. I loved to read, and then later my mom bought me a journal one year, and I started to write. But I didn't get the kind of encouragement from my teachers that told me I was going to be a writer. So I think when children and young people like you have that inclination to write and you love to read, then you have to follow your own instincts. The first paper that I wrote for when I was a freshman in college, my professor accused me of plagiarizing it. I was like blown away, like, wow, I spent so much time and work, why are you even suggesting that I plagiarize this? And he's like, you don't even know what the word ostracize means. And I said, it means to ban. I was insulted. I have a thesaurus. Gosh, why wouldn't I know that? But he thought, and then later when I thought about it, he thought the paper was well written, and he didn't want to give me credit for it because I was, at the time, in college. Somebody told me of Kane College at the time, and it was called North State College back then. But it was a student body of about 2,500 students at least, and there were 25 black students on the campus. And at the time, black students were not being encouraged to write. So I fought with him about that. He couldn't prove that I plagiarized it. He couldn't find it anywhere else, but he wouldn't give me a grade above a D. Now, it was at Rutgers, and I'm a Rutgers graduate, I had my doctorate from Rutgers. It was at Rutgers that a college professor asked me to, a paper that I wrote for him, he took a whole different approach. He said, I think you should consider having it published. And I said, wow, that was different. Published in this little journal, focused on education, New Jersey Association for Supervision, Curriculum and Development, and it's called The Hidden Curriculum in American History Courses. And that was my first published work. My name was different then, and I don't mind sharing it. It was Doris Scrubbing. And since then, I grew a lot, changed my name and everything. Okay, so this was my first published work, and the first real incentive that I had to become a writer and start writing novels. So don't let anybody discourage you. You are what you want to be. You can be whatever you want to be. Okay?
So to address your question, thank you for these inspiring comments and examples for our students. Directly. Just so you guys know, recently over the weekend, my father, I came to my dad and he doesn't have a will, and I said, listen, it's okay if you don't have a will, but I want you to look me in the face, I want you to look your wife, all of us in the face, and tell us what you want when you move on, right? You don't need to write it down, but you need to tell us. So he said, okay, I like that, I'm gonna go ahead and do that, but I've been looking through my records and you gotta get your stuff out of my house. I can't get to my will till you get rid of your stuff that's been sitting in my house way too long. So I had to go to my dad's house and pick up boxes of stuff from when I was growing up in his house, right? So it turns out I found the first half of my life in his house, meaning I found my high school graduation certificate, I found love letters from one of my ex-boyfriends and some other ex-boyfriends and whoever, and I found letters written by people who were supporting me when I was in the military. All these letters, supporting me through basic training and all my years in the military. And that was up until 22 years old, right? I'm now 44. So all that stuff goes up until around 22. After 22, by that point in my life, people were starting to text. We were texting more. And honestly speaking, we were emailing. And so I don't have any records. I have cards from like the past 20 years of my life. People still do birthday cards, right? But beyond birthday cards, I have hardly any postcards, any letters, anything. So why is that important? That's important for me because I had forgotten how much some of these people meant to me at that point in my life. I would have never been able to recall that with my brain. An X is an X. Like, it's hard for me to remember what that meant. But when I saw the letters, I was like, we really did love each other. He's not tripping. There was a real thing going on there, right? Same thing with, I was feeling really recently like I'm alone, like I've had to go through everything alone, like I've had to fight, like I've had to get, maybe because I'm a single mom, I'm like I'm alone. And when I looked at those letters, I realized all those years I was in the military, people supported me, people wrote to me, and those same people are in my life now. They're still my best friends, they're still my comrades, I didn't remember that though. If I hadn't seen those letters, I would have forgotten the work they put in to help me get through the military. I would have forgotten all those letters people sent to me when I graduated college. So I do think that there's absolutely a danger in what happens when we don't have the hardcore thing anymore. I don't think it means that we can't continue to capture, but there is definitely a challenge in the fact that so much is virtual and digital now, because what happens to the archive when it's like in this cyberspace and someone can erase it, right, in a way that they can't necessarily with a hard piece of paper. So that is a challenge.
Yeah, I raised that question because I think about that a lot. And I've been reading through some archives. I spent a lot of times when I was in South Africa. I studied in South Africa, studied Zulu, Afrikaans, and South African history and culture when I lived in South Africa in '95. And I spent a lot of time in the archives, months and months in the archives. And you can't access things. And I'm one to forget. So those things that Dr. Stevens is talking about reminded, those are things that have reminded me of who I was and the life that I've lived. And so I've raised that really because I want to suggest to you all to not just only do terse little quick quips when you're writing, right? You give somebody an emoji and it doesn't say much other than what an emoji, but what is really behind the emoji in your thought? Right? What's really behind the LOL? What comes with LOL? You guys probably don't use that anymore, but whatever it is that I'm old. So whatever it is that you all use, what is really behind that? What is really meant by it? And I think that if you break that down, then you can actually document some of this stuff. And what I strive to do early on was to take a lot of the things that I wrote, and when I was in South Africa, for instance, and I wrote long emails to people. And then they wrote me back long things. And I kept all that stuff. I made print copies and I archived all the digital stuff. Of course, I've changed computers several times now. I was talking about my wife the other day. And I don't know where the digital stuff is. But I know it must be somewhere that I archived intentionally. And so I'm going to go and try to pull that back before it gets too far down the road. And you can't pull it back, right? We're on, everything's on the cloud now. So even the devices that I use are probably, not accessible. So I have to go back and find another way to even access them. So I want you all to think about that in terms of your own lives. I think John mentioned some great things about things are too quick, and they are. It's hard to. We all moving a mile a minute, and so. If you really want to think about the legacy that you might leave, or even the legacy of your parents that you're younger, how do you help your parents document who they are? Just have conversations with them, I think, would maybe help in the process. And that even or even just write your parents a letter, write your cousins or somebody who lives in another country or down the road or something. Write them something. Vanessa made a question, and I wanted to ask everybody else the same question she answered. Where did we go? You said that your writing journey started really when you were in college, and I was curious, where did your writing journey start? And how?
Well, I'm different in the sense of, I guess you can say it's a luxury. My mother, she was a paralegal at the time at one of the largest, oldest entertainment law firms in Jersey, and they were most famous at the time for handling Warren Hill's case. Wow. But mad agents, they're literary agents, and I was like 9 years old, and she said to me, if you can write 20 pages, I wrote a book report and got, in a good grade, and she was like, you can write 20 pages, I can shop it to a couple of literary agents. So that was when I was 9, so it was like, it was always a reality for me. Yeah. There was never no, what are you doing, and I don't have a great relationship with my mother at all, but that was the best thing that she did for me. Yeah, so from 9, I'm like, well, she's there, so if I write good, I can come to her with something, but obviously, it was never good enough in my eyes, so, but that was the beginning. Now, in regards to professionally, to where I can make a livelihood, performing-wise, not writing, but just in regards to me being in the game, to sustain myself and my family. Man, they're so young. How many, all right, Jay-Z fans, anyone listen to Jay-Z's first album, Reasonable Doubt? All right, well, that's, anyway, there's a famous skit after a song called 22 Twos, and there's a woman named Maria Davis who's speaking, and it was a famous skit. She's like, who's smoking weed in here? And you look it up, you'll see 22 Twos at the end, but she's an HIV activist, and she was known for having this, the hottest open mic in the city called Maria Davis Mad Wednesdays. This was in the 90s, and that's where Jay-Z was performing at. All the rappers used to go there to perform there. So on the song 22 Twos, Jay-Z is rapping at Mad Wednesdays. I forgot where it was hosted at, but in the early 2000s, she switched it up to Mad Mondays at a place called Soul Cafe that was in Midtown, and that's where I went, get my chops, and every time I stepped off the stage, someone would approach me about how much to have you here and how much to have you there, and then a couple of years later, did the Apollo, got booed the first time, but then brought me back, and Yeah, and that's every time, like, the spotlight finds you if you have enough talent. So, yeah.
Oh, did you do yours already?
Well, yeah, she started giving the history of her, of that, and then we're gonna move into her, her personal history,
Okay.
next after this.
Got it. So I think, well, just so you guys know, what I prepared for you and what I called it here for today was from storytelling to storyboarding, from storytelling to storyboarding, conveying radical politics from history to film. And so I think that the journey that I kind of wanted to share with you guys today is more so about this being open and willing to write yourself into a profession that you might not be an expert in. I was trained to write, right? I went to school and they train you, right? And so I grew up watching my mother wrote books. And so that was a big thing as well. You can see a common denominator going on here with some of that. But I had some really close friends and comrades who do film. And I think that's why I felt like film is for everybody. I saw Professor Wager doing film, and I saw Dr. Calvani doing TV shows. You know, The Pulse, just didn't go to school for it, but why can't we? And so I think that I wrote myself into storytelling through film in the past 6 or 7 years, because I'd spent so much time watching Netflix over the past decade. And I just decided, why is film just for certain people? Why can't everybody do film? So the story is just that I was in Aruba during COVID. And I was in Aruba because everything was shut down. We weren't even meeting. I don't know if any of you guys were students during COVID, but we weren't meeting for part of it. Everything was virtual. So that was a great chance for my son to spend time with his dad, who lives in Aruba, which is a different country, right? It's all the way down by Venezuela. And I witnessed what happens when people like us stop going on vacation. For people like my son's father, who depend on vacation money to eat. Like, for us, vacation money is vacation money, but for some people, vacation money is how they eat. So we have to have the money to spend. We have to be able to make the extra money to go on vacation. For some people to eat, which means their existence is way more, the word we could use is precarious than ours, right? Way more unstable. And there's huge parts of the world, right, where people's existence depends in part on other people's, right? And we know that. Any of you from another country know that your family in those other parts of the world, they depend on you and what you send back to them, right? So in any case, I decided to document that. So I pulled out my phone and just started recording things that I was witnessing during COVID. The devastation, the isolation, things just being closed down, shut down. The same thing you guys saw here during COVID, the restaurants, right? Everything, New York, like quiet during COVID. So, but the impact being even worse there. So I came to storyboarding, and I'm still coming to it. I'm in class right now. Some of you might be in my classes. I'm in Professor Wager and Professor Smith's classes. I'm a doctor in class with you guys. Like, I'm in school here at ECC. So I'm still coming to storyboarding. I'm getting a better sense of what storyboarding is, which is writing through picture and idea. So I think that there are many iterations of writing, and I'm coming to it now. So we're having this conversation as I'm in the process of becoming a filmmaker. It's not automatic.
Go ahead, yeah.
So just to speak to and build upon what you were saying in regards to writing yourself into certain spaces, let's piece to the title, I have to make clear, and I'm very proud of this, like, I've never taken a writing course in my life, and I'm the inaugural writer in residence at Rutgers University.
Yeah.
Like, the head of the MFA
Right.
program, went through all the applications and the writings, and within a couple of days, like, him, I don't know him, I'm meeting him this week, but I've never took a writing course in my life, but I wrote, which is another, once I realized that on page is different performing, but on page, once I realized, oh, okay, this is real now. Like, I would look at my poem and look at everybody, I'm like, but that's either equal or better too. I saw myself in a space like that, and when I was sent the notification that they were looking for their first writer in residence. Usually it's artists in residence with painting, whatever. But as they're looking for the first writer, I'm like, oh, that's mine. But I'm 42 now, so I said, like, I put years into this, like years. So originally I thought I was gonna be in academia, being an essayist. I didn't think I could make that transition from performing poetry, which is dope, but you're only as good as your last show. Make a lot of money, but if you're not good at save it, yeah. So I'm like, let me just do the academic thing. Was supposed to go to Drew to do my doctorates in theology, went to Fordham, philosophy, Sarah Lawrence College, women's history, but yeah. So as soon as I seen it this summer, I was like, oh yeah, that's me. It makes sense. That's what I've been writing for. And here I am. Yeah.
So just one quick piece in regards to myself is that I'm a first generation college student. Everybody in my family they were really like lay people. So there was no academics, no history. I have a brother who's older than me, and I have two sisters. But my brother, he was smarter than me. I had struggled in school. I got B's and C's. My brother would never study for anything and got A's. The A's just kind of fell off the paper for him. I don't know how that happened, but I never saw him study. And the next thing I knew, he had an A. And he was always, his stuff was always right, and he could answer stuff and do stuff. And I was like, okay, well, how do you do that? And I would spend hours and hours studying. But also I had dyslexia, so that meant my reading was slow, and I struggled through that. And so all those things, and I got to the place where I was like, for me, my beginning for writing, I didn't really even like reading when I was a kid. I was a tinkerer. I like to take stuff apart and put stuff back together. So I can do all kinds of stuff, taking stuff apart, putting it together. I'm an inventor. I have an invention company. So I can do all of that kind of stuff. And I went to school in computer engineering. And so that's what I thought I was going to do. And then sociology got a hold of me, and then I was like, eh. But then I started writing poetry as an undergrad, and I started working, and I was at the radio station. I was on the radio for 4 years as an undergrad, and then I was working in 3 different news publications. And so that's really kind of how I got started in trying to tell the story of people of African descent, the experiences that we had, the trials and tribulations we had. And then I realized that, that I have something to say, and then the way I say it is pretty nice. I like how I say it, and other people like how I say it. And so then as I was listening to Malcolm and all these revolutionary, progressive ideas that folks had, and I got involved in the struggle. And then I graduated from college. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. And so then that told me that I had something else to contribute, and I continued to kind of build on that from there. And so when I went to grad school at Penn, and I continued that vein, and I've been doing that ever since. And as Dr. Stevens mentioned, I have a talk show. I've been doing that for, I don't know now, since 2011. So it's on TV, it's on Verizon Files, and whatever else. And so, just the thing I think that is good is that there's anything that you put your mind to and that you work at, you can do, right? Sometimes we think that you can't do certain things, but really you gotta dedicate yourself to something that's outside your comfort zone, or that you say you want. Because I say there's 3 things, the words that we should get rid of, really. And that's hoping, wanting, and trying. You can't hope anything into being. It's great to have hope, but hope doesn't do anything. If you want to sit on this panel, hope doesn't get you up here to the stage. Hope don't get you to he might have hoped that he was going to get a writing gig at a university one day, but hope didn't get him there, right? Wanting didn't get him there. Trying leaves room for failing, so you gotta push hard. And so I say, instead of those 3 words, I say plan, organize, and do, right? I think when you do those things, and I'm writing a book using that, and so when you plan, organize, and do, then you plan what you want to do, you organize your life. You need that quiet space, he said. And some people don't need quiet space. I know people who can write, but I need the quiet space. I can't even think without some quiet space. And then do is that you got to actually make the steps. You can say you're going to do it, but you got to step over there. You got to pick up a pen. You got to pick up a computer or a phone, whatever it is that you're using, and you got to actually do it. You got to do something. It doesn't happen by itself. So I want to move now into.
Okay.
I'm going straight to you.
Oh, okay, because I wanted to, you guys talk about.
Yep. No, everything is.
Okay. All right.
So I want to move now to our elder on the panel and give her time to. Yeah, we have to pay respects to our elders and give her some time to kind of break some things down in terms of how she got to these 4 books and whatever else she wants to relate about her history. And then we're going to move for that to Dr. Stevens, and I want her to move into her documentary. And then we're going to come to Professor White, and he's going to, and then I want him to share a poem or something with you, and then we can take it from there. All right?
Okay, I just wanted to, I've written a lot of stuff. I showed you the first article that I wrote that was published was nonfiction, the hidden curriculum in our American history classes. Well, I evolved, I used to write articles for black newspapers and different subjects, but when I started writing fiction, I realized that stories are not always about you. Sometimes they're unanswered questions that you think, like, how could this have happened? And I think that's how I started writing fiction. One of this book that I wrote, for example, Wrong. I was in China one year, and I was talking to this lady from our group, and we were just having a conversation about the hardest thing you've ever had to do. And I was telling her that one of the hardest things I ever had, I was telling a professor of my dissertation advisor prior to that writing this dissertation is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I said, wow, I had to redo something, and I was like, this is hard. I'm really, and he said, no, that's not the hardest thing you've ever had to do. And I said, no, what's harder? He said, raising children. And he said, raising children is the hardest thing you're ever going to do. And I thought about that, and he was right. But when I was in China, I met this woman, and I was talking to her about children, and she told me she had 5 children. And I was like, wow, that must really be hard. Raising 5 children, I did too. So she said, I didn't raise them. I said, you didn't raise them? So she said, no. And I wanted to, why didn't she raise her kids? Who raised them? So I said, well, who raised them? And she said, their stepmother. And I was like, how did that happen? But you can't ask somebody questions like that, So it was an unanswered question that I just thought about, how did she have 5 kids and let their stepmother raise them? That's my story. Wrong. A woman that had children that let their stepmother raise them. Was she wrong for doing that? Well, I'm going to let you decide. This is the book. Wrong. Okay, and then there was another with Kill or Be Killed. I had a friend, a cousin of mine. He came to stay with us one summer when I was a teenager, about 13. My sister and I both fell in love with him. So we kind of fought about him and who we liked the most and everything. And then he was very diplomatic. He would tell us jokes to make us stop arguing about him and stuff like that. And then he left. He spent 3 weeks with us that summer. And I thought he was the coolest, finest guy, and I was 13, he was 18. And he went to Vietnam. And then I heard that when he came back, he killed his wife. And I was like, how could that happen to him? He was so, but you can't go around asking him why he did that. I couldn't do that. And then I heard that while he was in jail, he killed himself. And I was like, what? That's this story, Kill or Be Killed. This is fiction, but it was based on something that touched me, something that I was curious about what happened. How could that happen? And I wrote a story about how it could happen. So that's my book, Kill or Be Killed. Fiction is made up stuff, but a lot of it is real stuff. I did a lot of research for this book. I interviewed a lot of Vietnam vets, found out what happened there, put this story together. So if you have a passion to read and to write, go with your passion and answer some of those questions that people form for you. Okay. Thank you for listening.
You want me to come up?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I'll get started here and then I'll come up if you can pull it up, get working. I mean, I think that if you really listen to what was just said, what you hear, because when these books were first introduced, right, what we said was these are all about Newark.
They're all Newark stories.
They're all Newark stories. But one story reflects a conversation from having been in China. One reflects black folks having to go to Vietnam. So Asia actually plays, this is a very Afro-Asiatic situation that I'm going on here. But that goes to a point that I was gonna make with you guys earlier, so I'll go ahead and say it now. In terms of legacy, part of the legacy of black writers for us to understand is that we address the state of the world. We might talk about what's happening in our own hood, in our own situation, but we think internationally. We think about what's happening all over the world. We've always had to, going back to slavery, right? We've always had to, going back to before slavery, we've always had to think beyond just what's happening in our immediate situation. There's a lot of reasons for that. And part of it is not simply just about thinking internationally, thinking globally, but also thinking solution-oriented, thinking in terms of what's necessary, how things need to change. And that's called being prescriptive. Like when you go to a doctor and they want to give you a prescription. It's not as superficial as when you go to a doctor and they just want to give you a drug, but it is thinking in terms of solutions, right? And that's also a very important part of the legacy of black writers, is thinking about solutions. And these solutions have varied, whether it's David Walker and his appeal to the colored citizens, or Ida B. Wells talking about every black person needs a gun right at the door in case someone wants to come show up at your house and lynch you. You need to be ready for that, right? There's always this prescriptive element. And I think a lot of times for those of you who decide to go into writing, what happens when you go to graduate school is that you're often encouraged not to be prescriptive. You're encouraged to be objective, to be neutral in your writing, to be academic, to be scientific, not to take a side. And oppression takes sides. And so many of us, our world comes out of oppression. So taking sides is not wrong. Sometimes taking sides is fundamentally necessary. And you should never feel guilty about taking sides. And I want to say that in the context of the genocide that's taking place in Palestine right now, right? You've got over 2 million people quarantined and locked up. Never at any point during World War II under Hitler, right, was there the threat of 2 million people at one time being potentially locked at one moment. Over 2 million people. You have right now, every 15 minutes, a child being killed in Palestine, every 15 minutes. And so we're encouraged even at our school now not to take a side. Oh, it's just such a bad situation for all humans, right? And it is a bad situation. We do need to think about what side everyone needs to be thinking, or what side we're on in this situation. But don't ever feel like you can't take a side in the face of oppression and injustice. Don't ever feel that way. So with that said, what I wanted to show you guys here is that in the same way you have so many people in Palestine who are essentially in a condition of apartheid, right? And apartheid comes from the Dutch word status apart, or to be placed apart, right? That's what I experienced when I was in Aruba. When I was in Aruba, you guys, what I saw is that before Aruba became this big tourism island and where people go to, right, to have fun and party, right before that, Aruba was an island where, because it's super close to Venezuela, so if any of you guys know, Venezuela, there's a lot of oil in Venezuela. And so when you go to Aruba, what you can see is that there's still evidence of the fact that back in the day, years ago, you guys, Aruba also had an apartheid. But Aruba's apartheid was the U.S. ExxonMobil that went to Aruba, set up a refinery, and then they brought all these workers over to work in their refinery from Jamaica and the British Caribbean because they speak English, and they set them apart from the American engineers and the advanced professional white workers that they brought over from the United States. So they had an apartheid structure in Aruba, and the wall is still there. So the same way that you have these walls and borders in places like Palestine where people are locked out and locked in, and what happens to them, this is not just Israel. Israel is just an exacerbated case of what imperialists have been doing for decades, all right, if hundreds of years. Okay, so this is an international problem. It's not just a problem of one group versus another. So I wanted to show you guys images of this wall, and this is part of what I'm documenting. So right after this speech right here, right after this speech right here, you'll see images of the wall. Sure. So this is the part of Aruba that's obviously not for the hotels, right? This is not where the tourists go, right? This is where the workers live. This is where the workers who used to work in the oil fields, the black workers.
And this is where caravans
That's where they lived.
Those are all the Trinidad people, Muslim beaten plants and stuff that were on the street.
Yeah, because they did for carnival with them from their home land.
Exactly, and then the Arabian people embrace it and breed some from it. Yeah, but actually English people who really, the Jamaican, the Trinidadians, the Saints, the
destination, right? So obviously the tourism is not there. It's an apartheid,
My
right?
name
It's
is
in another
Don
part of the
Vire
island, right?
I was
So then this brother right
born
here, and I'm only going to show you
in the
images for a little bit. This right here, you guys down here, this is the remnant.
It was not until
You can see it. There you go.
ages maybe 8, 9
That's the wall.
that I asked the question,
It's still there.
why has this and is this taking place? And what was the purpose of that guardhouse and that
The
gate?
man who's talking right now is a
And
black
by
man
that
who
time,
grew up in Aruba,
I was
and
learning
he
to
has to
swim
get permission to go behind this wall,
on a
right?
beach that was adjoining the opposite side of that
What
gate.
he's describing now is that when he was
Because
growing
I
up,
was told
there were different beaches in
in my
Aruba,
formative
and the white
years that
children were
I
allowed to
could
go to
not
certain
go to any
beaches, and
beaches
him as a black
on
child
the
had to go to the other
side
beaches.
of
The
the
beach that he had to go
gate
to
and
is
guardhouse.
where people drown.
And I was told
Because
that
the
those
ocean
were
is
the
so
best
strong,
beaches,
it'll suck you out. Versus
namely
the
Baby
safer
Beach
side,
and Rogers
where it's
Beach.
safer to go into the
I
water
had
and
not
nothing will
learned
happen.
those names until I was
So
a
that's what he's
teenager.
describing here. So in any case,
And
the point is you can see the film, right, once I'm done with it. But what I want you guys to see is that this is part of the legacy of black writers, right? The best and most interesting part of the legacy of black writers is black protest, right? And it's usually protest internationally, incorporating people all over the world of many different races and colors and hues. And it's a legacy all of you guys are encouraged to join.
Y'all still with me? Yeah. All right. To understand how I got here, you first have to understand how for the black male body, the easy part is entering and exiting enough dreams. Mouth open, speaking whatever language some non-black body allows it. The hard part is that this is actually something the black male body itself allows. Its mouth is a storied mouth. And if language is our only means of categorizing experience, this storied mouth is obviously not housed by an ordinary body. Flesh fought inside out, wounds lit clean, overlooked by what's overseen, the black male body is an extraordinary touring machine. With a lucid hammer for a heart, meant to actually soften the blow. The black male body is heroic enough to save itself and black enough to feel that all of it is indeed worth saving. However, with all of the weight the black male body is forced to carry in a single word, the black male body may be too black.
one, because it was in the woods. I went to University of California, Santa Cruz. It was up in the woods. It was beautiful. I loved the up in the mountains. I loved that environment. And of course, they said that it had the ratio of
boys to girl was like 6-1, and that was an incentive for me. So I was like, yeah, that looks like a good place to go. So that was another reason back then when I was, in that mindset. That's another reason why I went there. But I ran into some beautiful people who helped to help me to think better, help to see the world through a different lens. And that lens incorporated seeing the world through the eyes of an African. And understanding the African within me, and understanding that had something to give back. And that once I understood that and began to pull that out, then when I was writing poetry, at some point I got to the understanding that I wasn't writing poetry anymore. And what they told me was that the things that I thought were poems were called ancestral deliverance. And so that those things that came out of me, and most of the stuff I write, comes in that vein. It comes in not something that's about and by and for me, but it comes in the vein of ancestral deliverances. It comes in the vein of things that folks before me and maybe even after me have said, and I just happen to be the voice, whether it's the written format or not. Most of what's in here is now in here. This is a dissertation it writes on one side of the page. It looks like a regular, it's still a lot of writing. But it doesn't look like your typical book. And so most of what's in here, so what I had a publisher, Rutledge, who I shopped my book with, and they liked it, and they put in a series with a Malefe Asante. And so this book is in a series of lots of other books with some great people who I respect. And for me, it was really a great thing. And so that you can, the difference I would say in writing a book and the dissertation, and then I'll stop with this and we'll have a few minutes.
Can I just make a quick comment before we finish?
Okay, and that is that the dissertation, you have a committee, everybody, you have all these people, and you have to prove that you are the authority. And when you are writing the book, you are the authority. It's a matter of tone and confidence in self to say that you would love somebody to think that you're wrong when you write it as a book. Why? Because I can say, okay, you don't like that? Go write a couple of articles about why you don't think it's right. Right? Prove me wrong. And then maybe if they prove something and I agree, then I can come back with another article or something. And so it opens a dialogue. So writing, I want you to see writing as a dialogue, especially academic writing, between other folks. And I think that sometimes we get stuck in academic writing and we only talk to each other. And I think that's one of the failings of academia. And so we have to figure out ways to take our academic writing, not that it's unimportant, but and that level of scholarship is unimportant. But I think the failing is that a lot of times we end up writing stuff that if you're not in our disciplines, you have no idea what we're talking about. And so we've got to find a way to change our writing so that the layperson can tap into it, so that folks in different disciplines can tap into it if we really want our stuff to be used. And I think that's what's important.
I just wanted to tell you a quick kind of funny story about dissertation writing. When I started, can you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry. When I started writing my dissertation, I was told that my class was going to be the first class from Rutgers that was going to do their dissertation on the computer. And this is in the 1980s now. I got my doctorate in 1990. Okay, so they told us that dissertations before this digital age and computers and stuff, 50 pages was required, 50-page dissertation. Said, but because you guys now have this added advantage of knowing the computer, we are expecting at least 100 pages. Okay, so you guys down, this is in 1990, here we are in 2020, and you guys probably will be expected to write a book about that big. I don't know, I'm just telling you, things are changing as we evolve in this electronic age.
Thank you. I don't necessarily think this dissertation is probably exceptionally long. Most of them are probably closer to 150, 200 pages. Some they also, you can get a dissertation today by writing 3 articles, scholarly journal articles, and getting them published on a specific subject. So there's different ways. I think that you should write a dissertation myself and plan to publish it. So with that said, do me a favor, help me thank this panel for their